It's just my opinion, but a word of advice. Always be on your guard when around gods.
I'm sure you remember the entity that changed your fate, the Heavenly Principles. In fact, the Heavenly Principles has been quiet since the Conria disaster 500 years ago.
Each Archon has an internal magical focus that resonates directly with Celestia itself, known as a Gnosis.
Perhaps Makoto got a higher power involved in all of this, but whatever the explanation, her solution is what saved us all.
Just as prophecies are usually only the future as seen from the perspectives of the gods, are the things that you shall see different from the fate that the gods perceive?
The gods goad us on with the promise of their 7 treasures. Rewards for the worthy, the doorway to divinity.
The stars, the sky, it's all a gigantic hoax. A lie.
It is time to talk about Zhongli. Definitely the most mysterious Archon, but one of the more mysterious characters in all of Genshin, and how the 4 shades of Faunus, the primordial one, have been undermining Celestia this whole time. You know that quote-unquote Archon war that took place where all the gods battled for a divine throne and seat of one of the 7 to be an Archon for Celestia? Yeah, there was never seats to be grabbed. They were already predetermined and being manipulated by the 4 shades behind the scenes. They've been pulling the strings this whole time, cultivating each nation, predetermining the Archons that we actually got. And Zhongli is no different. We just didn't know it until now. Now we're going to talk about the 4 shades, we're going to talk about Paimon, but let's first talk about Zhongli and how this all ties in together. Because the more you think about everything we do know about Zhongli, the weirder it gets. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Where did he come from? Well, it's currently unknown. It is stated in Genshin that he descended to Teyvat over 6,000 years ago. He is the oldest Archon. The second oldest Archon being Rukkhadevata. He remembers her. He remembers all of them. The ones that have died, the ones that are still remaining. Which means he's older than 6,000 years old. That's just when he showed up in Teyvat. And to no coincidence, he showed up right before the Archon War. Again, not a coincidence. You'll see why. Another crazy thing about Zhongli is he remembers Rukkhadevata after she's been wiped through Irminsul after Sumeru's Archon quest. Rukkhadevata doesn't exist anymore. She never existed. Her memory through the ley lines is all but gone, but Morak still remembers because he still refers to him and Venti as the 2 original Archons, which means, even though everyone forgot Rukkhadevata, he didn't, even after she was wiped from Irminsul. Where did he come from? Why is he here? And that is what we're going to go over in this video. Something that we don't really know a lot about in Genshin is the 4 shades. Very ominous, mysterious, ancient characters in Genshin and Teyvat's history. The 4 shades were created by the primordial one, who created Celestia, defeated the dragons and the sovereigns, created humanity. The 4 shades really resembling Faunus' angels, all represented by the artifacts. The plume of death or the feather, that is always an attack stat representing the shade of death. The goblet artifact representing the shade of space or void. The flower artifact, that's always just an HP stat representing life. And then of course the timepiece representing time. And then the crown artifact represents Faunus, the one who started it all. Paimon. And with Natlin, I never actually stopped and thought about how much the shades have been undermining Celestia. Let's look at Mondstadt, where they outright worshipped Istaroth, the Shade of Time, for, well, a long time. And then Venti, who's another really ominous and sus character, just inherited the Archon throne, and the Archon War went on for thousands of years. And you mean to tell me that Venti, being as weak as he is, never got challenged? Even though he was busy terraforming the lands of Mondstadt and definitely has powers over wind and time. We don't know the connection he has with the God of Time, but it's there. Maybe he's a successor. Maybe he's another incarnation or reincarnation. We're not exactly sure how it fits together, But Venti is more than just the god of wind, and is 100% connected to Istaroth on a very deep level. We're just not sure exactly how. Let's go to Inazuma. Istaroth also helped with Raiden Makoto and Raiden A with the Sacred Sakura. We learned that in Raiden A's second story quest. In Fontaine, the Shade of Life literally created Egeria, the first Hydro Archon, and then Egeria created the Oceanids, using the Primordial Sea within their blood vessels, and then later turned those same Oceanids into humans, which then brought the prophecy. And now with Natlin, the Wyab that literally functions as Natlin's ley lines, it has been stated, confirmed, that the first ever Pyro Archon was a mortal man who made a deal with the heavens. And because Natlin's entire culture is war, death, and resurrection, they have an afterlife known as the Night Kingdom, or the Wyab, which all tribes of Natlin worship and gain ancient names. They communicate with it. This is pretty well 99.9% chance to be the Shade of Death. What else could it be? Sumeru's a bit of a tricky one. We don't know of any shades tampering with it yet, or officially, but the goddess of flowers Nabu, who lived under the primordial one as well, after the war in the heavens took place, went to Sumeru and made friends with Rukkhadevata and King Deshret. The goddess of flowers' influence is directly responsible for King Deshret rebelling against Celestia. They originally wanted him to have a gnosis for Sumeru, but he declined and outright rebelled against them. So they had their own unique scenario. But when it comes to Liyue, there really hasn't been any shade that's tampered with it that we know of. That is where Zhongli comes into play. This mysterious descender just so happens to show up right before the Archon War would begin, right after that war in the heavens took place. And not only did he show up, he was decimating the competition. Zhongli's the equivalent of the Royal Rumble, when the hype character that's said to return, that has all the plot armor, shows up as the last member of the Royal Rumble and just decimates everyone. That is what Zhongli did in the Archon War. He eradicated the competition, comes out of left field as a descender, and is the first to claim a seat. Mysterious to say the least. But I think, like every other nation, Liyue has been cultivated by one of the four shades. Now, how exactly does this fit together? Well, I think it's a lot like Mondstadt and Fontaine. A shade is directly responsible for Zhongli to be guaranteed to take the Geonosis and the throne of Liyue. But where exactly did Zhongli come from? Was he banished from Celestia? Did he come from a completely other world? There is something to suggest that he might have, especially since he created all of the Mora, the currency within Teyvat. That only started with him. Maybe he's a golden god or entity from a completely different world, where they did have currency and money, and then when he came to Teyvat, took over Liyue and became the god of contracts. He created Mora, the currency now used within Teyvat. Maybe that's why he is the god of contracts. He made a contract that he would descend and make sure to take control of Liyue as one of the seven, much like the other nations being cultivated by the Shades. Another option is he was banished from Celestia. This is pretty common, since all of the Shades seem to be banished, considering they followed the Primordial One, and the Primordial One would have been usurped after that battle in the heavens. Paimon is another character that's been banished from Celestia. Obviously, every single thing about her points towards her being the Primordial One. Obviously her appearance, but look at all of the Easter eggs on her design as well. The crown, the Primogem on her coloration, her symbols, the fact that characters say that she has strings connecting to the heavens. Paimon is 1000% from Celestia. We're not exactly sure who she is, but the Primordial One is the most likely. All of the Seelies were banished as well, the Goddess of Flowers being one of them, and Istaroth went to Enkanomiya when it sunk into the watery abyss. So Zhongli could have also been banished to Teyvat 6,000 years ago, and then, when the Archon War started, he decimated the competition. I know a lot of people believe him to be the Shade of Life, but I really don't think so. I'm not ruling it out, I'm not saying it's impossible, I just really don't think so. But what's the shade that hasn't really manipulated any of the four nations yet? the Goblet Shade, the Shade of Space or Void. Think about it. Istaroth, through time, cultivated Venti, a little wind spirit that would become the Anemo Archon and be uncontested for the rest of the Archon War. Istaroth also safeguarded Inazuma from the Abyss through the sacred Sakura and Raiden Makoto, and obviously the Shade of Life created Ajiria, gave it life, and the Shade of Death, through death in the Night Kingdom, cultivated Natlan and its systems, through the first Pyro Archon. So what would the Shade of Void or Space do to cultivate Liyue, if they use their powers in the gimmick that they're associated with? Well, summon a Descender, which is exactly what Zhongli is. A random Descender that came to Teyvat 6,000 years ago. That is the exact circumstance that the Shade of Space would cultivate a nation. When the Archon War was about to start for the new Celestia, the Shades and the Primordial One, Faunus, Paimon, all banished to Teyvat now, and the Shade of Void summoned Zhongli as the final contestant in the Royal Rumble, and he decimated the competition, was the first to claim a seat, and that is why he has no history past 6,000 years, is one of the strongest individuals we've ever even heard about in Teyvat, isn't affected by Irminsul, remembers Ruka Devada, and created all the Mora, also probably made a contract with the Shade of Void, an agreement, which is why his whole nation is geared around contracts. He was sent there to undermine Celestia, break the rules of the current heavenly principles, the same way the Shade of Death and the first Pyro Archon are doing in Natlan, with their lack of ley lines, and the same way the Shade of Life created an Archon to take the throne, probably without Celestia knowing, since we know Focalor tricked them. So obviously they can be tricked, and if you think about it, it makes complete sense. This is why none of the Archons are loyal to the current heavenly principles. None of them are reluctant to give up their gnosis and relinquish their authority. This has been a cultivated plan since the beginning of the Archon War and since the power Celestia changed hands. I also believe Paimon was banished after that war and now is in a shrunken, weakened state with her memories wiped. Wouldn't that be crazy if you have Zhongli, probably directly connected with the Shade of Space, and Venti, who is obviously closely connected with Istaroth, the Shade of Time, both looking at us like, whoa dude, the Traveler's traveling around with the Primordial One. Act normal. Because if Paimon isn't the Primordial One, that is the worst case of misleading I've ever seen. I mean, she could be a Moon Sister, but there's more than one Moon Sister. Why would she be the mascot of the game, traveling around with us, this big important character that goes wherever we do? If she's just one of the Moon Sisters, the Primordial One, besides all of the Easter eggs and information we got, just makes the most sense to be the mascot of the game, and one of the more significant characters in Teyvat's entire history. The reason it's important to go over Paimon is because if the four Shades of Faunus are undermining Celestia, and the Archons are a direct result of that, that is extremely important, since Paimon would be their original creator and ruler. But let's play devil's advocate here. Sure, we've had Descenders before, beings that have come to Teyvat from outside this world. This has happened through the Abyss, Conria, Descenders, even Nibelung the Dragon King has left and come back at one point. But isn't Zhongli an Adeptus? How could he be either from a new world, maybe like the Goddess of Flowers from Celestia in the old world, or just from Celestia in general, if he is an Adeptus? Well, this actually doesn't contradict anything, because the Adepti are not a specific species or race. They're a group associated with Rex Lapis and are loyal to him, and as the game states, a group of illuminated beasts, gods, or other powerful long-life individuals loyal to Rex Lapis, most of them bound by contract to Liyue, to protect it from the demons and the evil gods, and Zhongli referred to as the Prime Adepti, meaning the leader of the Adepti, which doesn't really contradict him being a descender or from somewhere else. The game even states that the word Adepti is ambiguous, and the word itself translates to having extreme longevity or immortality as a result of spiritual enlightenment or illumination, hence the word illuminated beasts. The game even says that the word itself takes on a variety of different meanings depending on the context. In Genshin Impact, it typically refers to beings who have reached spiritual immortality, within the nation of Liyue, of course. It's no different in Inazuma. They have the yokai, long-life species that come from all walks of life. Yaimiko's a type of yokai, Arataki Ito, Kujo Sara, there are tons of different yokai. The Adepti are not much different, so Zhongli is the prime Adepti, but that doesn't take away from him being a descender whatsoever. If anything, that kind of reinforces why he would be the leader and chosen of the Adepti. And it's not like Hoyoverse likes to mislead us ever, right? That never happens. But all an Adepti is a group of extreme long-life species, whether it be Cloud Retainer, Mountain Shaper, Ganyu, Yanfei, Madame Ping to name a few, all different, but are all Adepti, obtaining that illumination or enlightenment. The reason why I'm defining what an Adepti is because that's one of the biggest rebuttals to Zhongli being from Teyvat or not, the fact that he is referred to as the prime Adepti. Now, I'm not saying it's not possible he still could be from Teyvat, and his Descender title might be because he's glitched within Irminsul or the system, the status quo of Teyvat and Celestia. We don't know the circumstances, obviously, that's why we're talking about it. But the point is, him being a Descender is not ruled out from him being referred to as the prime Adepti. They can both exist at the same time. They don't contradict each other. Now, what's even more sus about Zhongli, whether he was summoned here by the Shade of Space, whatever the circumstances are, he arrived 6,000 years ago, right before the Archon War, and in the earlier days of Liyue, him and the god of dust, Guizhong, they both ruled as equals in the Gili Plains area. We know that the god of dust perished. Then later on, Zhongli would establish Liyue Harbor. But I find it interesting that she looks petrified. And if Zhongli was originally summoned here under contract to do exactly what the Shades are trying to do in every nation with its Archons, to undermine Celestia, do you think Zhongli would have killed Guizhong? But it is stated in-game and through different descriptions like the Memory of Dust, that Guizhong might have learned some forbidden knowledge and some ancient secrets that they're not supposed to. Similar to King Deshert from the Goddess of Flowers and Orobashi in Enkanomiya, this pretty well always comes with a death sentence. So I wonder if Zhongli had no choice. Now finally, that brings us to the final shade, the most mysterious of the four shades, the Shade of Space, commonly referred to as Asmodee. Do I believe the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles is the Shade of Space? That is a pretty common theory, but I really don't think so for many reasons actually. You probably recall at the very beginning of this video, there's a voice line by Nahida that states, "We recall the entity that changed our fates," aka the beginning of the game, the opening cutscene, referring to this individual as the Heavenly Principles, and that they've been away for 500 years, but the Gnosis are a symbol of their authority over Teyvat. So she's referring to this exact individual as the Heavenly Principles that have authority over Teyvat through the Gnosis. I honestly do believe and always have. When referring to the Heavenly Principles in Celestia, this is who we're referring to. It's been mentioned many times that the Heavenly Principles have been away for 500 years, probably due to the cataclysm and the toll it took on them. Nahida references that same thing while referencing this exact individual who prevented us from leaving and changed our fates. So I'm assuming they're all the same person, and that this isn't just the Shade of Space. Also, the Heavenly Principles straight up tells us, the arrogation of mankind ends now. The reason I bring this up is because there's no way Zhongli can have any connections with the Shade of Space if it's the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles. I don't see there being a viable reason why they would try to undermine Celestia but at the same time prevent us from leaving because of the arrogation of mankind. It doesn't really add up. But rather, it would be much more interesting if Zhongli was summoned as a descender from the Shade of Space, almost undercover if you will, right before the Archon War was about to start, in order to guarantee he would win Liyue, similar to Istaroth being a huge part of Mondstadt's history and Barbados, and Istaroth even making sure Raiden Makoto would be able to help Raiden A, even through the fabrics of time, through the sacred Sakura, and the Shade of Life, literally creating an Archon out of thin air. I really do wonder if there's more context to the Goddess of Flowers being put up to the task of basically turning King Deshret against Celestia, but the Shade of Death, the power of the heavens, making a pact and a deal with the first Pyro Archon to literally establish Natlan's entire laws and rules, the traditions they've had since the first Pyro Archon. I don't know about you, but it all seems to blend together quite nicely. As for Shaznia, well, only time will tell when it comes to Shaznia. But if I'm wrong, then which shade played a part within Liyue and Zhongli? Did a shade play any parts at all? Is Zhongli's old age, is his ominous backstory and incredibly ambiguous origin just a coincidence? Is him being able to recognize and remember Ruka Devada being a descender just a coincidence and a glitch within Irminsul? And his insane strength, is it all just a coincidence? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Despite it being incredibly frustrating not having these answers, especially when it comes to Zhongli and Barbados, they are seriously slacking on some story quests here. We need some answers, Hoyoverse. But I guess in the meantime, it's always fun to speculate and try to put the pieces together. So I look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments. Maybe you have your own theories or can add to some of my points. Maybe there's some information that I might have missed that actually contributes. Let me know. I also have a little bit of an announcement. Me and the wife started a second channel. It's mainly going to focus around Hoyoverse music, different themes and songs within all of the games, because I love nerding out over soundtracks. You've probably noticed in a lot of my videos I use a lot of Genshin soundtracks, but a lot of other games as well. My favorite thing about any given video game, whether it be a Hoyoverse game or not, is the soundtrack. It's something that I've always had a great passion towards. So more or less this channel is going to cover all of the soundtrack within the games, but also different playlists. Like I uploaded a Halloween playlist for Genshin. Going to be doing different top 10s and ranking the themes, ranking boss battles and such, making some unique and funny playlists, as well as actually going over the lore and doing deep dives within the lore of the soundtracks, because believe it or not, there is quite a bit of lore hidden within the game sounds as well. A good example of that is this song right here. That's Zhao, in his original Bird Adepti form, calling out to his dead Yaksha comrades. Just things like that I like to geek out over. I'm going to be starting with Genshin and Honkai Star Rail and maybe expanding to the other games over time. We've just started the channel, but if these games OST is something that you find fascinating like I do, just thought I'd mention it here. But on that note, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, and as always, we will see you all in the next one. Later.